Welcome from Perth, Western Australia. I'm Alan Wilson, and I'm delighted to have you join me for this quick walkthrough of my crowd density continuum. If you're like me, then you will love observing crowds. To do so, you need to know some of the theory. Many crowd managers refer to the seminal work of John Fruin, where this all began. Here's a summary table of Fruin's PhD research. On first glance, does it look complicated to you? Let's take a closer look. Using Fruin's level of service, this table shows spaces where people are moving, people are climbing, and people are standing still, all calculated in square meters per person. Overall, these numbers are in ranges, which is why the content looks complicated. Let's analyze Fruin's work further. There are patterns here, like this, and this. If you switch the space criteria around into density, that is people per square meter, which is what you all use anyway, but not everybody can visualize, when you go into the standing area, the queuing aspect of crowds, then these numbers are the ones you need to view. These ranges top out at 5.26 people per square meter. That is a number that we all know and talk about, even though people's body shapes and sizes have been increasing over the years, which could now impact these numbers. A range of 4 to 6 people per square meter is what most people seem to think, focus on, and use for safety reasons. Do you know what that looks like in a crowd? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. To help you make sense of all this, I'll highlight only the top threshold numbers of each range. What I'm going to do is swap Fruin's levels around so they go from the bottom to the top. Therefore, the threshold numbers will increase visually with their density. If you collate this theory into a visual format with people per square meter on the left and Fruin's level of service on the right, you have the walking density on the left, which is 2.17, and on the right you have the standing density, the Q density limit, which tops out at 5.26 people per square meter. Numbers that still don't compute very well with me. How about you? Are you making progress? I have developed a visual way of easily extrapolating this out for the future to highlight the red area or the danger zone, like this. Something not often used in crowd management is Fruin's volume to capacity ratio. In simple terms, this shows the capacity as a percentage per 100 square meters of the available area. That is, the volume. When you reach Fruin's level of service F, then your event is basically full. Anything over this capacity increases the density to levels that are dangerous. To extrapolate this further, I'm going to expand my visual crowd density continuum to include Fruin's volume to capacity ratio. Here it is, in action. Now let's go back to my original crowd density continuum. You can do a deep dive using two key variables, movement and sound. The movement criteria will appear in the column on your right, with the spatial context in the column on your left. Now focus on the three colors in this people per square meter column. That is, the green, yellow, and red squares. Green, that's individual movement. Yellow is collective and group movement. And the red area, this is where I like to live, crowd movement. It's the danger zone. People per square meter. At 1 or less is vacant space, unrestricted walking. Using stadiums for our analysis, you've got the open plaza area where they're coming up to the entrances. People have an awareness of others. A cafe-style gathering at 3 is where they form lines or small clusters. But that's not queuing. This is meeting and greeting people. As you move into the more group-focused, busy concourse, you will see people self-organizing into flow lanes. I'm going to the toilet, you're going over to the bar, they're going outside for a smoke, whatever. And when you get to 5.26 people per square meter area, the active crowd where you will see slow walking and some physical contact where people start bumping into each other. This is where it all starts to get interesting for crowd scientists. 6. Front of stage at the barrier. You experience swaying motions and micro movements. If you can see this movement, then you will now know what the crowd density is just by observing. Trains, heavily restricted, but it depends on what's happening to determine these things. And then you get deep into crowd crush conditions, where individual movement is severely restricted. Can you go any higher than 8 people per square meter? A colleague at the first Crowd Safety Summit in Australia said to me, "On the weekend, we had to make an intervention at 3 people per square meter." I replied, "What do you do when it gets to 10 people per square meter?" He said, "Have you ever seen 10 people per square meter?" You tell me. Go on. You tell me. This white square has an area of 80 square meters. I'll put my crowd density continuum on the left with the 3, 5, and 8 people per square meter thresholds. In each of these areas, there are 20 people. How do I know? Well, one sunny Sunday morning, I had nothing better to do than count them all. That's 540 people inside 38 square meters. What's your best guess for the density? Most people estimate 9 to 10 people per square meter. Numbers most people cannot comprehend, but the reality is the average crowd density is 14.2 people per square meter. If you want a specific number, I could spend hours calculating one. However, remember that crowd density is contextually specific. I'll now take you deeper into this visual from that tragic incident. And you know what? This crowd is very dense at the top because of the way the crowd is flowing from right to left. And it is the crowd that is flowing, not the individuals. Look at the bottom, the numbers. I'm not even going to bother you with them because they're still horrendous. That's an average of 10.7 people per square meter. You can take the average of the whole wide area and it is 12.4 people per square meter, which is a totally meaningless number. Because when you look at the top left-hand corner of this area, you can see they're tightly packed in. And at the bottom right-hand corner, they're not as densely compacted. What can you do? You can go back to Fruin and, as he suggested, start using ranges, which to me makes total sense. In this case, the crowd density is approximately 11.5 to 13.5 people per square meter. What does that look like from a movement point of view? If you take this marker on your left and you move down to the ground below, you will see how this crowd is moving due to the forces involved, because these individuals have no control whatsoever over their own movement. Notice how far and how quickly this crowd moves people along this laneway. Now you can examine crowd density using the second variable point of view, that of sound. The sound criteria will appear in the right-hand column. 1 person per square meter or 0, you will only hear ambient sounds. The open plaza is a low-frequency hum. Crowd murmurs and casual conversations happen during the cafe-style gathering areas. You have the busy concourse, where music transitions and concession sounds are heard. When you get to 5 people per square meter, or level of service E, you have an active crowd emitting occasional surges of sound. I've always been able to tell the density of a crowd, the stage of the event, by the sound in a stadium or at a festival. It's a skill well worth developing, and my crowd density continuum will help you do that. And at the front of the stage, you will hear loud group murmurs. And a packed train, you will hear raised voices and pressure sounds when the crowd density is dangerous. When you experience crowd waves, crowd crushes, and crowd collapses, you will hear the very intense walls of sound. Like the Phil Spector Motown music producer wall of sound. You can hear it in dangerously dense crowds. Once you've heard it, you will never forget the intensity of that sound. What does that sound like? That was 3 to 5 minutes before the Itaewon Halloween tragedy. The first people were only 20 meters around the corner from where most of the 158 people died. Those who died were in that area on your screen right now. What you have just experienced clearly highlights that there is a direct relationship between the movement of people in crowds and the sounds that they emit. I'll put this all together for you. On your left, you have the movement. On your right, you have the sounds. You have people per square meter directly correlated with their relationship to Fruin's level of service. I'm not going to read them all out. They're in a handout I've prepared for you. To quickly summarize, we have unrestricted walking and ambient sounds at the bottom. No problems. The threshold of the yellow level is the slow walking with some physical contact and occasional surges of sound. But when you get up to the red area, the danger zone, you have severely restricted movement at 8 people per square meter in Fruin's level F, and very intense walls of sounds. And what crowd density did you just experience in that Itaewon laneway? 10 to 12 people per square meter, which is smack bang in the middle of the danger zone. I trust my crowd density continuum highlights for you that by looking at the movement of a crowd and listening to the sounds they emit, you can make a quick, real-time assessment of the crowd density involved. You can then take corrective action immediately. I'm Alan Wilson. Until we meet again, thanks for keeping people safe at events.